Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Shirin Hund. I'm a Harvard-trained internal medicine physician. I moved to Switzerland 6 years ago and started working with the Chanot Group, where I learned all about integrative approaches to functional medicine, longevity, prevention, and epigenetic analyses. And then I opened up my own company, which is called Virgil Health, which is a health advisory program for patients looking for more perspective, more understanding, more agency, and more respect for their health, guided by physicians, nutritionists, and sports scientists to give them the full picture and protocol on the road to better health. I named it Virgil because Virgil was the poet that said, "The greatest wealth is health." And that's what I truly believe. I'm so happy to be here today with Tanya and Dina at Red to talk about gut health and how gut health informs every aspect of our health. And I very much hope you'll join us tonight. Thank you so much. So ladies, I'm so happy to see you all here, especially that we know each other, we work together. I have high respect for what you do. If at any time you want me to translate something in German, just tell me. I think that this will be of great interest, especially given where you work, what you're doing for the clients that you serve. And the topic was chosen actually by Dina and Tanya and the ladies who come to Red, and they all expressed an interest in learning about gut health and what exactly the gut is and how does it influence every aspect of health. The first lecture we did was talking about inflammation, detoxification, and especially with women's hormones. And since you were not present at that lecture, I'm actually going to dive a bit into what the gut is and how does it play a role in detoxifying as we talk about the gut. So the first thing I always like to explain is, what is the gut? Everyone says gut health, we need to strengthen our gut, we need to be healthy in our gut. But if I asked you, what is the gut? Could you tell me? So I will ask you, what is this gut?
I will ask you.
Okay. Can anyone guess? Does anyone? Yeah, the Darm. The Darm is part of it. So the Darm is, Darm, Dickdarm, and Dünndarm in German, but large intestine, small intestine in English. This is part of the gut. It's not all of the gut.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else know?
The liver.
Liver. That's a great question. It is super important. It is not part of the gut, but it plays an important role, and we're going to talk about that.
Okay.
The stomach is part of the gut. There's one other part. It's right at the end. It's not very sexy. It's when we go to the bathroom. Not the vulva. That's sexy. It's in English we call it the rectum. So it's when you actually go to the bathroom. So if you think about what the gut is the stomach, the large intestine, the small intestine, and the rectum. The mouth is not the gut. The liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas are not the gut, but they play an important role, and we're going to talk about what that is. And so if I asked you, why is everyone talking about the gut? Why are these three organs so important? Could you tell me?
The immune system has an impact on it, or has a connection.
Yes, it does. Excellent answer. Does anyone else have a thought? It deals with hormones. Excellent answer. We're going to talk about that. Any other ideas?
Probably also
Medical health, yes. Mental health, yes, it does. We're going to talk about that. Any other aspects? Absorption and nutrition. How about skin? Skin is also an important one. We're going to talk about all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I would like to impart on you with why the gut is so healthy is that it's really the master player of our entire health. It's not one part, one small part of our body. It is the master controller. And the way that I like to describe it is that if you go to a hotel, you can think of your body as a hotel experience. And when you have, come in, please. Welcome. Hello. No problem. Take a seat, please. We just started. So when you think of the gut as a hotel, when you think of the body as a hotel, what you see on the outside, your skin and your hair and your nails, this is the facade. This is the external appearance. And people see this and they say, wow, that hotel looks really pretty, or she looks really pretty. Or they say, that hotel looks old, not really well kept, old-fashioned, not healthy. When you talk about hormones, the hormones are the messengers. They send messages to every other part of the body. So you can think of your hormones as the staff in the hotel, and they communicate and they're outreaching to different parts of the hotel, and they're very necessary. You need a good, healthy staff to keep things going. And when you think of your mood and your chemicals of the mood and your mental state, this is the energy. You know if someone has good energy. You know if you go to Red and you see that there's great energy at Red, you want to be there. These are your mood, your neurotransmitters, your serotonin, your dopamine, and your GABA. So where's the gut? The gut is the kitchen. And you don't see it when you're a guest in the hotel. You rarely go into the kitchen, but you know it's there. And you know there's a lot going on. And even if you don't know all the players, who the chef is, who the servers are, where the food comes from, you do know if you ate good food or bad food. You do know if this was a good experience or a bad experience. And I bet you that if you left that hotel and you had a bad experience with the food, that would be one of the first things you would say if someone said, how was this hotel? You would say the food was really good or the food was really bad. So the gut is the kitchen. The gut governs the entire experience. It's hidden, but it plays a role in everyone's experience. And that's why if the kitchen is working, if the gut is working well, things are great, and you don't even know why they're great, but you just know things are great. But if it's not great, you know, and you feel chaos, and you feel imbalance, and you feel something is wrong. So that goes back to what I asked you at the beginning. The gut is not just food. The gut is your hormones. The gut is your skin. The gut is your immune system. The gut is regulation of your mood. The gut is your risk of disease. It has so much to offer. And now we're going to go into why. So we talked about what the gut is, that the gut starts in the stomach. It's the large intestine, it's the small intestine, and it's the rectum. The other parts of the body play a role in assisting it, but they're not defined as the gut. And now I'd like to teach you a bit about what happens in the gut, that when it works well, it works really well, and when it doesn't work well, you start to realize things are going wrong. So I'm going to erase my beautiful art and make more beautiful art. Okay. So we're going to start with the stomach. And the stomach, I always like to say, in German, stomach is Magen. The stomach is like a prison. It's like a fortress. It is meant to keep things in. It is not meant to let things out. And why? The reason is because once you start digesting food, which happens in your mouth, and you start breaking down fat and sugar and protein into smaller and smaller units, and it makes its way down the esophagus, the Röhrspeise, then it goes into the stomach. And there, the stomach starts to do something magical. It starts to use acid to break down the food more and more and more. And you wouldn't put acid on your face. Acid is dangerous. Acid is not a healthy thing. But the stomach is meant to put acid inside, not going outside, so that it does the work properly. But what happens when things go wrong? What happens when things go wrong is, let's say that you went on vacation and you were eating lots of sugar combined with lots of alcohol and lots of coffee, and you know that you weren't eating really well, but you did it anyway. What starts to happen is that these toxins, these toxic compounds enter the stomach, and the stomach sees, I have something in me that it's not really, really healthy. It's not meant to be there. And whenever there is damage in the body, the body has a natural response, and that response is called inflammation. And people always say inflammation is bad. We don't want inflammation. And I always try to teach my patients and my clients, well, inflammation is good when it's controlled. If you cut yourself, your body needs to have inflammation to heal. If you are sick, your body needs to heal. This is very normal, but it's controlled. It's for a short period of time. The problem is when inflammation, when damage is constant, non-ending, never stopping, and their body is constantly seeing damage, 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 schade, 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 and then it has to respond, respond, respond. You will get very tired. You will lose all your energy. You will lose all your resources, and you will start to see disease. So in the stomach, when this happens, if you imagine that the stomach is like a prison, it keeps everything in. It's not supposed to let things out. But if I have poured sugar and alcohol and caffeine and lots of medication, what happens is that the stomach walls start to open. They start to become leaky, if you've heard that word before. And so it's as if there's a little hole in the stomach. And when that happens, the body is very smart and it says, there is damage. That's not just supposed to happen. The stomach is supposed to be like this, but it's like this. I need to respond. I need to fix it. So the magical immune system comes and starts to create holes to fill it. But there's a principle with this. And the principle is that whenever there is damage, the immune system responds, inflammation starts to happen, and water follows inflammation. This is a principle in Chinese medicine that whenever there is damage, water follows damage. And you may say, water? That doesn't really make sense. Like, where is the water coming from? How do I know that there's water? You do know that there's water. So if you feel that you're eating food and you can't explain it, but you feel like every time you eat food, you feel bloated. You feel blähungen. This is water. You feel water if you hit your joints and your joints get bigger, they get swollen, they get painful. For women especially, if they have fibroids, polyps, cysts, this is a water component. This is a swelling. This is all water following the damage. And this is really important as we continue the conversation. So what happens also is that if there are holes in the stomach, it means that the acid and the toxins that are in the stomach are coming out. And this is the problem of inflammation, because the stomach is meant, it was built in a way to keep the toxic products of the sugar we eat, the protein we eat, the fat we eat, the alcohol we consume, the medications we take, and the acid that's meant to stay inside, it starts to go outside. And so we start to have damage, we start to have disease, we start to have problems. And then we continue. And the point of going into the intestines, the large intestine and the small intestine, is this one. The point of the large intestine and the small intestine is that the small intestine further breaks down food, but adds water to create stool, to make a bowel movement. And the large intestine actually forms the bowel movement, and then it goes into the rectum so that you can go to the bathroom and have a bowel movement. So the whole process of this is actually detoxification. It's taking what comes in through the mouth, and it's processing it in the stomach and the intestines, and it's making it exit the body in a safe way. That's the whole purpose of the gut. There are other players that help with this. So the mouth helps with this. The liver helps with this. The gallbladder helps with this. The pancreas helps with this. And they are equally as important, but they are not the gut. We're going to talk about why the gut is so important. So what we talked about at the beginning is how the gut plays a role in so many different, almost random parts of the body, from the hormones to the skin, to the immune system, to the chemicals of mood. But how does it do that? Why? We think of it only with digestion, but it's not. How does it have such a big role? And you have to really understand and respect the complexity of this beautiful gut. It's not just made of a stomach and a large intestine and a small intestine, it's a rectum. It's an ecosystem. It is an ecosystem that actually has its own brain, that makes its own chemicals, that makes good bacteria and has bad bacteria. And all of these aspects play a role in your overall health. And so now I'd like to really go into what these different aspects are so we have a greater appreciation of what the gut does. The main concept I'd like to bring to is that if the gut is an ecosystem is this universe of living, breathing things. And if one part is unhealthy, the whole ecosystem suffers. So if you think of a flower, and the flower has the blossom, and the flower has the stem, and the flower has the leaves, and it has the roots, but it sits in soil, it sits in a living, breathing environment. If you don't feed that flower with water and with nutrients, it will die. If the soil that the flower lives in is sick, is malnourished, is poisoned, the flower will die. And it doesn't matter what you throw at it. It doesn't matter if I buy a magical fertilizer. It doesn't matter if I have the most expensive watering can. If these three aspects, the flower, the seed that becomes the flower, and the soil, if these things are sick, the flower will die no matter what I do. And in this way, the gut is a flower, is the seed, and is the fertilizer. And that's why we have to start with this in order to understand the whole health. So let us start with hormones, because hormones are a very interesting topic, and many people ask about hormones, especially female hormones, but also male hormones, and they all play a role with the gut. But we don't know how. What does a hormone that's made in the reproductive tract have to do with the stomach and the intestines? I'll teach you why. Do you have a better eraser or no? Because I have to try again. Thank you. Is everything clear so far in English, or should I repeat something in German?
Also the flower or plastic?
No, you can erase the flower. It's gone. It died.
Oh.
Thank you, my dear.
It's an old whiteboard. Sorry.
It's okay.
But green,
It's okay. I'll just do it up front. Thank you.
I'll try to. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So I want to spend a bit of time talking about the liver, because you mentioned the liver, and the liver is a magical organ that helps the gut do its very important work. What does the liver do? Does anyone know? It detoxes. That's a very general statement, but it is correct. Can you give me more? What is detoxing? This was our last lecture. It cleans, it resets. You can think of detoxification as the daily reset of our body when it encounters everything. When it encounters food, when it encounters medicine, when it encounters hormones. It's not just alcohol and cigarette smoke and things that we think are bad. It's even the things that are inside that are supposed to be there, but the liver still has to detox it. And why is that so important? The reason it's so important is because whatever you eat, whatever you touch, whatever you smell, the furniture you sit on, these can be toxic. These can have harmful properties. The furniture can be coated with flame retardants. The cooking ware can be coated with PFAS. The air we breathe, the smoke we inhale, the water we drink. I think most people understand if you eat a lot of sugar, if you eat a lot of fat, this is not good. But even if you eat a lot of protein, this is also not good. Even the medicine we take, even if it's for a good reason, this has a toxic component. And even the hormones that are in my body and they're meant to be in my body, they still have to go somewhere. They have to get cleared in a safe way. And the liver is this magical chemist that does this property of cleansing and detoxifying. And I want to explain the liver in this way, that whenever a toxin or a food or a hormone or a medicine is in your body, eventually it comes to the liver to get cleaned. And what does the liver do? You have to think of the toxins and the food and the hormones as a passenger, as a person. It's a living thing. It's not an invisible thing in our body. It's like a living person. And this living person is driving a car. Toxins need to drive a car made of fat. They live in fat. They need fat. That's how they go through the body. Even a hormone goes through the body in fat. But when it gets to the liver says something interesting to these passengers called toxins. And the liver says, hold on, you can't come through here. You need to get off of your car made of fat. And if you want to come through here, you need to change cars and get in a car made of water. You might say, why? What's the point? If a hormone is always going around in fat and the food is going around in fat, why does it suddenly need to go to water? The reason is because water is how the body cleanses itself. Water is how we cleanse ourselves through sweating, through going to the bathroom and peeing, and also going to the bathroom and pooping. These are all elements of detoxification, and they require water. So it's a pretty interesting thing that the liver is doing. It's using its chemistry to say, I need you to turn into water in order for me to do my job. And it does this in two phases. And it's literally called phase 1 and phase 2. That's how they're called. And so if you imagine that the hormones and the toxins and the medications, they all come to the liver and they're all riding in a car made of fat. Then phase 1 is them coming into the liver and they're starting to be removed from fat. And this is intense. This is not an easy thing to do. And it requires some help. And you might say, what is the help that it needs? And the help is quite simple. The help is B vitamins. The help is magnesium. The help is zinc. The help is iodine. These all sound familiar. These are things that we eat. Some people take it as vitamins. But without it, phase 1 cannot do its job. And if phase 1 cannot do its job, what happens is the hormones and the toxins and the medication and the pollution cannot enter the liver and they stay in the bloodstream. And then they start to go places. And they go places we don't want. So they go to the head and they cause migraines. They go to the face and they cause pimples and acne and redness. They go to the joints and they cause arthritis or gout. They go to the stomach and they cause irritable bowel syndrome or reflux in the esophagus. They go to the reproductive organs and they cause fibroids and cysts and infertility. Every single thing that we can think of that's negative is a result of toxins not getting cleared. But then let's say you ate enough B vitamins and you ate enough magnesium and you ate enough zinc and you made it through and now you go to phase 2. Phase 2 is even more difficult. Phase 2 is where that car made of water is made, and this is really complex. And it requires, again, the B vitamins, and it requires magnesium and zinc, but it also requires N-acetylcysteine. It requires glutathione. It requires coenzyme Q10. Do these sound familiar? Again, so it's a theme that these things that we have heard of, these things that we might spend money on as supplements, this is the reason they are important. But if we do a good job with phase 1 and phase 2, the toxin leaves and it's riding on a car made of water and it can exit the body through sweat, through peeing, and through pooping. But how is this related to the gut? It is related to the gut because of the hormones. So every single hormone eventually ends up at the liver because it needs to be safely packaged and processed and cleared. You cannot have a lot of hormones and you can't have too little. It has to be perfectly right. It's like the Goldilocks story, if anyone knows that. Not too much, not too little, perfectly right. And we know, men and women know, if the hormones are not perfectly right. We feel it and we can measure it. So this is why it's so important that this is done right. So what happens? If the liver does a good job, it takes the hormones, it sends it through phase 1 and phase 2, it packages them nicely in water, and then it sends them to the gut, to the intestines. And it says, oh, I've done my job, now you do your job. But what happens? If you have a good gut ecosystem, the gut ecosystem will say, I see these hormones, they're packaged nicely in water, I know what to do, I can take care of it. They will be clearly metabolized and they will go back to where they came from safely and they're not going to cause any problems. But if your ecosystem, if that flower, if that seed, and if that soil is not balanced for some reason, and there are many reasons, what happens is that in the gut, there's a special chemical. And that special chemical is called beta-glucuronidase. You don't need to know what that is, but you do need to know that there's this thing that lives in your gut, and it's a bit nasty. Because what it does is it sees these hormones, and it says, you think you can come here riding on water? You can't. I'm going to undo this process. I'm going to undo all the hard work that the liver did, and I'm going to send you back out. And what does that do? For women, we notice this. This is something called estrogen dominance. Who has heard of this? I see some women are. A lot of women suffer from many reasons. And they might not have a name for it, but it's this principle. This is a principle of estrogen dominance, meaning that the gut and the beta-glucuronidase has been nasty and evil, and it has separated the hormone from this water, and it has converted it back to its original form. So it has no choice. It can't keep going through the gut. It can't go where it's supposed to go. It has to go out into the body and cause damage. And in the body, whenever you have this imbalance, it always tends to follow a pattern. And the pattern is that the estrogen is higher than the progesterone. And that causes significant problems, and we feel it. We feel it through painful periods. We feel it through acne. We feel it through weight gain. We feel it through problems conceiving. We feel it through difficulties in menopause. So all of this has a root in this process, which is pretty amazing because no one explains it like that and no one treats patients like that. They just say, you're having difficulties with menopause, take hormones. But it's actually this.
But I don't see this just like a problem in the menopause. I see this at young girls.
Yes, exactly. Struggling.
Estrogen dominance, and they don't, and they're taking like maybe the birth protector.
Exactly.
Cutting out that cycle, but
that doesn't solve the cause. So if you have a young woman with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they might take metformin, but does that solve this? No. That's exactly right. What type of doctor are you? Health practitioner. Okay. So again, the gut helps you process, package, and eliminate things, detoxify safely. Does anyone have questions about that? Okay. Now we're going to talk about the mood. So if I'm unhappy, I might just take medicine, right? I might just take an antidepressant, or I might just take an anti-anxiety medicine, right? That's what most people do. It's what a lot of doctors will do if someone says, I'm not feeling well. But it starts again in the gut. And like I said, the gut is this ecosystem. It's much bigger than just 3 organs. It actually has its own brain. We think of the brain as just being here, but the gut has its own nervous system. In medicine, it's called the enteric nervous system. Enteric meaning belonging to the gut. But it's a living, breathing brain. It doesn't look like the brain that we have here, but it's the same system of cells. And these cells convey messages and signals, very much like the brain sending signals through the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. And it has over 1,000 million neurons. This is enormous. It's a whole universe in our gut, but we don't talk about it and we don't treat it like that. But again, why is it important? Why does having a healthy gut, how could that help me if I feel depressed or anxious, or maybe I feel like I have ADD or ADHD? What does that have to do with it? And I'll show you why. So like I said, the gut has an ecosystem, and that ecosystem has different bacteria. You have good bacteria, and these bacteria are meant to protect us against inflammation, against damage. Because if we eat and if we live, we're going to be constantly exposed to things that are not good for us. So inside the gut, there are bacteria that are meant to protect us, and they do a pretty good job. There are also bacteria that don't do a good job, that are kind of evil. They're not meant to be there, and they come from different places. So some bacteria migrate from the mouth, and they go into the gut. And then the gut says, you're not supposed to be there. You're supposed to be here. You're like this foreign invader. And that bacteria from the gut, from the mouth, does damage here. So the people who tend to have really bad oral hygiene, bad cavities, bad gingival health, the bacteria from there goes down here. The bacteria also from here go up here. So like I said, the rectum, the lowest part of the body, is part of the gut. So if you don't have a good vaginal microbiome, if you have bacteria or fungus or yeast, it will also go up here. And then the gut will also say, you're not supposed to be here. I don't recognize you. And things start to happen. Problems start to happen. And all of these bacteria, the good bacteria and the bad bacteria, they actually make chemicals. The same way that the brain cells can create chemicals for our mood, the ones here do too. And you've heard of these, even if you don't know what they do, but you've heard of them, certainly. So serotonin, 90% of serotonin is made here. And what does serotonin do? Serotonin is like the happy calm. It promotes calm, peace, sleep. Dopamine is our energy. It's our motivation. And GABA is relaxation. Some people take GABA to help them sleep. So what does this mean? It means that if you don't have good bacteria, healthy bacteria, whether you don't have enough good bacteria or you have too much evil bacteria, foreign bacteria, they're not going to make the right balance of these chemicals. And if you don't have enough serotonin, and if you have too little GABA, of course, you're not going to sleep well, and you might feel anxious, and you might feel depressed. But it all goes back to here. It goes back to the fact that the gut has its own brain and its own nerves and its own system for making chemicals. And how do we feel that again? A lot of people feel it. So again, they might feel anxious, they might feel hyperactive, they might feel depressed. But some people also just feel kind of off. So we hear a lot of times about brain fog, and you can't really quantify that. You can't measure brain fog, but people know. People know when they feel not as sharp. They feel like their concentration is lagging. Their focus is not there. They say, I can't remember things the same way I used to. But again, you can't quantify it. It's just something your patient tells you, but this is all from here. And if I tell you that the brain, there's a brain living here, but there's a brain living here, what's the point of having two brains? It's because they talk to each other. So just because there's a brain here and there's another brain here, it doesn't mean that it's redundant or useless. They play an important role. So the brain of the central nervous system talks to the brain of the enteric nervous system. And they do that through a very interesting nerve called the vagus nerve. Has anyone heard of that? Okay. And that's something that we actually do when we're here at RED. We're actually practicing our vagal tone. So I'd like to tell you what that is. You have two parts of your nervous system up here. One is called your sympathetic nervous system, and one is called your parasympathetic nervous system. And sympathetic nervous system is meant to keep you alive. In the ancient times, it was when an animal was coming to attack you or someone was coming to attack you, and you better be ready to run or fight. Otherwise, you would die. So what happens in the brain? The brain senses threat, danger, and it sends certain signals. So it tells you to breathe faster and harder. So you breathe faster and harder. It sends blood to your muscles. So you're ready to fight or run. It sends blood away from your core and from your digestive organs. So you might feel cold and you might feel like you have to go to the bathroom and you might know that. Like if you have a big presentation or you have a big thing, you feel kind of like, I need to go to the bathroom. It's because the blood has been diverted from here to the essential parts of the body. And again, this is necessary. If you're in danger, you better be ready to fight. But the body is quite smart. And the body said, after this danger has passed, there's no reason to stay like this. You're in a safe place. So the sympathetic nervous system is turned off and the parasympathetic system starts again. And if the sympathetic system is ready to fight or run, the parasympathetic nervous system is, you are safe. You are fine. And when you are safe and when you are fine, certain things can happen. You can sleep. Your body can recover from illness. Your skin can rejuvenate. Your hair can grow. Your nails can grow. You can reproduce because you're safe. And you can digest. So if you ever think about it, in a time of extreme stress, in a time of extreme anxiety, if you were sick, if you had a surgery, do you feel hungry? Not really. Digestion in food is a very time and energy expensive process. And so when your body needs you, when you're recovering from illness, when you're sick and you have a fever, when you had a surgery, and when you're just nervous because you're giving a lecture, you don't need digestion. You need to focus on what you're doing and keep your body healthy. So what's really important is that the parasympathetic nervous system is digestion. It has to be in a relaxed state. If you feel in danger, if you feel under threat, even if there's no threat of death, but you have a deadline at work and you have a lot going on at home, your digestion will be turned off. And you will not be able to digest properly. And you will feel this. You will feel like something is not well in your digestive system. You will feel heartburn. You might feel pain. You might feel bloating. You might feel constipation. You might feel diarrhea. And you might feel many other things, from brain fog to low energy to not being able to sleep. And so how does this brain, who sees danger or who sees safety, talk to this brain? They do it through something called the vagal nerve. And the vagal nerve is this long nerve that goes all the way down, and it goes past our diaphragm and it goes into our gut. And it's pretty amazing how long it is. If you actually see it, you see how long it is. And when you see how long it is, it actually makes a lot of sense. Because do you ever wonder why people tell you to breathe deeply? Think about it. If I'm breathing from here, very shallow, very fast, not very efficient, I'm not using my vagal nerve. I'm not lifting my diaphragm. I'm not going into my belly. But if I do, I'm activating my vagal nerve, and I'm saying, oh, vagal nerve, wake up. I'm using you. I'm training you. I'm using my diaphragm and I'm using my belly. And this vagal nerve connects the brain here to the brain here. So if you remain in a relaxed state, in a state of no threat, in a parasympathetic state, your brain talks to the brain here and says, everything is fine. You are safe. You can do what you're meant to do. And what you're meant to do is metabolize your hormones properly, digest food properly, sleep properly, be in an overall calm state. But if we don't use the vagal nerve properly, the brain cannot communicate to the brain here. So the fact of feeling under threat, of feeling stressed, of feeling attack or danger, even if there's no attack or danger, directly affects this. And if this brain senses danger, all the signals of health will be turned off. You will not be able to have beautiful skin because that's turned off. You will not be able to reproduce because you're in danger. You will not be able to fight back from illness or injury as well. So then how do we fix this gut? How do we fix this beautiful ecosystem? Can anyone tell me some things that they've heard that they should eat? What is a probiotic? That is correct. What is a probiotic?
It's a good gut bacteria.
Yes, it is a good gut bacteria. I would like you to think of that flower again. If you think of the flower and the fertilizer, the Probiotic is the seed. It is the good bacteria that sets the garden, that sets the environment for health. And can you give me some examples of probiotics besides what you offer here?
Fermented foods.
Yes? Someone other than our expert. Yes, in yogurt, with certain yogurts. Yogurts that have live culture, meaning not a processed yogurt, but a Greek yogurt or a skyr yogurt. Yes. Kefir. Kefir is excellent. Anything else? Sorry? Kombucha. Kombucha has live bacteria. Yes. What about things that we don't like? I think a lot of people recognize kombucha and kefir. How about one food that's very German? Yes. Kraut. Yes. And kimchi. Kimchi that is Korean. These are probiotic foods. But let's say, like, oh my God, I cannot have kimchi or I hate sauerkraut. What would you eat? You can create probiotic food yourself. So you can actually pickle vegetables, which is something a lot of people do. So if they're going on vacation and they don't know what to do with the vegetables that they have, you can pickle them. And this creates probiotic bacteria. And it's actually quite tasty and it's very easy to do. So it's not just, I think a lot of people think, I have to eat kefir and I have to eat sauerkraut. And you're like, I hate sauerkraut. I'm not going to do it. So you can think about that. What about a prebiotic? Yes, it is one type of fiber. It is one type of fiber. Yes. Insoluble fiber. So, insoluble, meaning it cannot be digested. That's what it means. Prebiotic, pre meaning before. So what does that have to do with the probiotic? It's food for the other one. Exactly right. So a prebiotic is feeding the probiotic. It comes from a non-digestible fiber and it is nourishing this environment. So if the probiotic is the seed, the prebiotic is the soil. What are some prebiotics? These are foods that I think many people eat. Yes. Yes. Something else? Yes. So I'm going to twist it a little bit. Banana, yes. Other fruits are in a different category, but banana, yes. Anything else? Those are more in the other category, but I'm going to tell you some vegetables that are in this category. So this is like the category of bitter. If you think about foods that are bitter, maybe you don't eat a lot of them, but you know that they're important. So garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, chicory. I think these are things that we eat, but we don't like have a whole bowl of it. But these are really, really healthy because they're feeding the probiotic. They are acting as the fertilizer. And now we're going to go into the third category. So you said insoluble fiber. So what's the opposite of insoluble? Soluble. So digested fiber. So fiber. But there's a little nuance to fiber. So this is the most important, more than the prebiotic and more than the postbiotic, because this is the thing that is really supporting and growing the bacteria that are in the gut. And when people say I'm eating fiber, right? So they say like I eat fruits and vegetables or I eat nuts and seeds, so I'm eating fiber. It's important to make a bit of a distinction. You don't actually digest the fiber. The fiber is fermented by the bacteria. The fiber is a byproduct of the bacteria that's already there. And there are different types. And has anyone done a stool microbiome test? No? Okay. If you ever do a stool microbiome test, you will actually see the different categories of these bacteria that create the fermentable fiber. And they have different names. You don't need to know the names, but I'm going to tell you them just so in case you ever do a test, you're like, that's what she was talking about. So the different categories are things like butyrate, short chain fatty acid, propionate. I think the most important thing for you to know is butyrate. Butyrate bacteria are the most important because these are the ones that are most strongly associated with immunity. And you measure these. When you do a stool test, you actually measure them and you see which butyrate bacteria I have and which ones I don't have. So what are sources of fiber? You started.
I mean, what we consider to be the solid food, like seeds and
Yes.
veggies.
Seeds and veggies, fruit, yes. Anything else besides these big categories? What type of rice?
Well, not the white one. Wild rice.
Yes, whole grains. Whole grains. So not just brown rice or wild rice, but quinoa, millets, very healthy grains. Nuts and seeds, we said. We're missing one category.
Ginger and stuff.
Lentils, legumes. Ja, genau. Kichererbsen, chickpeas, kidney beans, bohnen, and lentils. All of these are fermentable fibers. They bloat you. Okay, so I'm going to correct you with that. You get bloated when you don't soak them. If you soak them, man liest es in Wasser. Vorher. Idealerweise für einen Tag. And most people don't do that. And most people also don't do that with rice. They just eat rice. They just cook rice. I promise you, if you soak rice or any grain or legumes and even nuts and seeds, ideally for one day, you will not feel so much bloating.
Brazil, we always do that. Now since I'm in Europe, nobody does that. Sounds like maybe just different rice.
No, it's cultural.
Yeah, we like that. Yeah.
But it's cultural. It's cultural in the Middle East and in Asia. They also do it. And you can think of it like it makes sense. Like someone who's in Asia, like they're eating rice every single day. Someone who's in the Middle East or in India, they eat rice or lentils every day. And they're not being like, oh, I'm bloated, so I'm not going to eat that. So I promise you, if you can soak it ideally for a day, just put it in water and leave it, you will feel different. And I think that's also important because a lot of people, I hear it from my patients a lot of times that they just say, I'm intolerant to it, or it doesn't sit well with me, or I get bloated, or I get pain. And then they eliminate it. They eliminate it entirely from their diet. And so what we just talked about probiotic, prebiotic, and fiber. And so if you're someone that says like, I hate sauerkraut and I hate kimchi and I hate yogurt and I'm just not going to eat it. So then you're not getting your prebiotic. And if you're someone that says, I really hate garlic and onions and asparagus and I never eat it, then I'm not getting my prebiotic. And if you rarely eat vegetables and every time you eat beans or rice, you feel bloated. So then you say, oh, I'm intolerant. It doesn't sit well with me. So I'm not going to have it. Then it begs the question, what are you eating? And what are you eating? And what does this look like? Because you're actually not giving it anything to work with, right? I remember once I had a patient who had 30 intolerances. And she just said, I don't eat 30 categories of food. And then I really want to say, then what do you eat? Do you eat like paper? Because I don't know what food you eat. And if I don't know what food you eat, how can I help you with this? So the last thing I'd like to talk about is skin, because skin is external and the gut is internal. What do they have to do with each other? But we all know when our skin looks good and we know when our skin looks bad. And I'd like to challenge that by thinking of them as two different things. I would like to actually put this out there in the world that the skin is the mirror of the gut, which means if the gut is imbalanced, your skin will show, because all of those toxins that couldn't go through the liver and couldn't get out of the body through the rectum, or couldn't get out through sweat, through urination, or through going to the bathroom, they have to go out somewhere. And they usually go through the skin. So whenever you see pimples and you see acne and you see rosacea and redness, this is a mirror of what's going on here. And I hope that this lecture has given you understanding of what the gut does, of all the different roles that it plays, of how important it is, and how fundamentally everything we consume either helps or hurts this. And I think so many people go through their life and they don't consciously think about what they eat, how they eat, and what that really does. And I really hope my biggest intention when I do these lectures is that people leave with a sense of respect and understanding and agency over their life, than thinking that, wow, I don't have to do much, but if I think a little bit more about the food that I'm eating, and I think a little bit more about the toxins that I'm exposed to, and I think a little bit more about the beautiful magic of what the liver and the stomach and the intestines do, I think we can all live a bit healthier. And so I want to thank you all for your attention, and I would love to answer any questions, or if anyone, not just questions, but if anyone has even a personal story, if this has resonated with you, if you're comfortable sharing, like, oh, I actually felt like this and I went through this, then I think everyone would love to hear it. I can just speak from personal experience that as a doctor in this space, I'm constantly confronted with people who tell me I suffer with my skin, I suffer through migraines, I suffer with pain, my hormones are a mess. But fundamentally, it starts here. And if we don't address it here, nothing we do here, no medicine we take, no supplement we take, no cosmetic product we take will fix the root cause. And I look at the body with such awe and respect of what it does. And I hope that I can give that to the community and the patients around me. So I want to thank you all. And if anyone has questions or feedback.
I have a question. Okay, so when you eat things, and then, for example, I also heard it's not good to eat one specific, like a routinely meal.
Yes.
So you're supposed to eat a lot of different things so that you have a lot of different bacteria in the gut.
Very true.
But sometimes it's like you get bloated because you haven't had that specific thing in so long. And then isn't it that, so when you eat it, the microbiome will like rearranging to digest that specific thing?
I would challenge that. So you are totally correct when you say it's the diversity. And I didn't go into it as much, but I will do that now. When you think of the gut as an ecosystem, the ecosystem is only healthy if it's diverse, if it's resilient, because like we said, the food you're eating creates the healthy bacteria and the balance of healthy bacteria to bad bacteria. Because you might always have a bad bacteria. You might have eaten something. You might have been exposed to something. Something came from here. Something came from here. But if you have more good bacteria, it's going to do its job. But the only way to have an abundance of good bacteria, and that's what we see on the stool test, we actually measure the different bacteria species. And I can say, she doesn't have any of this, but she has a lot of this. So we need to work on foods that increase that one. This one she's doing okay. That one she's missing. So the diversity makes the gut resilient, and it is recommended, the gold standard is to aim for 30 different species of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, spices and herbs. And most people forget about spices and herbs. They just think, how am I going to get 30 fruits and vegetables? But if you think about it, it's actually not that hard. If you count the spices that you use for cooking, if you add the herbs, and if you think, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I will make it a goal to incorporate a fruit or a vegetable. It's actually not hard to reach 30. And I would say for the people that say like they might find discomfort, I would challenge that by saying that first they might be eating it the wrong way. They might not have prepared it in the way that it's supposed to be prepared. They might overdo it. So like I also will say, like, if I just eat a whole bowl of beans, I might not tolerate it well, because people also don't understand what the portion is. So when we talk about the portion, if you talk about the right portion of meat or fish, it's not half the plate. It's this much. That's not a lot. And if you talk about beans, nuts, and seeds, it's even smaller than this. So if you do it like that, you're not likely to get discomfort or bloating. But I think most people, when they eat, they don't think like that. And they think, if I'm going to have rice, it's going to be half the plate, or even more than half the plate, or if I'm going to have pasta, it's the entire plate. That's how I would think about it like that.
Got it. Thank you. I have a question too. Actually, I have two questions that kind of relate to them. So first of all, I'm a huge fan of fasting.
Mm-hmm.
And all like a lot of things like both Vanessa talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And another question I have is now with regards to fasting, we've had a couple years of GLP-1s, so
Yep.
peptide therapies that are basically inducing a fasting state,
Mm-hmm.
right? Have you had any experience of how the gut health and how gut microbiome change with influence of GLP-1?
Great question. Okay. So to answer the question with fasting, and again, this was more talked about in the lecture we did last time, but I'll go into it more. The whole purpose of digestion, it has a purpose, and the purpose is energy. And I always say that it's as if, we're all living in Switzerland, but it's like I'm from the US originally. So if I'm coming from the US to Switzerland, I can't use American dollars. I have to use Swiss francs. I have to change the currency because it doesn't matter how many dollars I have, I can't use it here. Digestion is the same principle. Digestion takes the currency, which is food, it's protein, sugar, and fat, and it changes it into a different currency. And this is called energy. It's called ATP. That's the whole purpose of digestion. And this process is made in a certain part of the body, in a certain part of the cell. Does anyone know what that's called? It starts with an M. Mitochondria. It starts in the mitochondria, which is inside the cell, and the cell is the unit of our life. And the mitochondria make energy. They do it well. It's hard to measure. You can measure it, but you can't do it at a typical Hausarzt praxis. So how do you know when it's not working well? You know it when you sleep for 10 hours or 12 hours, but you still wake up exhausted. You know it when you eat, but instead of feeling energized, you actually feel worse. You actually feel rather depleted or tired after you eat. You feel it when you exercise, and instead of feeling like vitality and exuberant, you actually feel really depleted. And why is that? Because mitochondria make energy. They make ATP. And to make energy, they also need energy, and they need resources. So everything that has to do with regeneration, restoration, growth, repair, meaning digestion, building muscles, losing fat, cleaning the brain during sleep, healing the body's immune system, this requires energy and time and resources. And if the mitochondria is not 100% healthy, if it's only 50% healthy, you will feel it. It's not going to do a good job, right? That's where fasting comes into play. So remember when I said digestion is a very expensive process, which is why when we are sick, when we have injury, when we're in a stressful state, the body turns off hunger because it says we don't need to be digesting. If I just broke my arm, like I need to focus on healing my arm. I'm not going to be focused on eating and feeling hunger. I need to focus on this. Fasting is this principle. Fasting is a way that we send a signal to our body. Right now, we are not eating. We are not eating, so you don't need to put all your resources and time and energy into digestion. Put it somewhere else. Put it in healing, putting in cleaning, put it in rejuvenation, and give this mitochondria a bit of a break. Allow it to wake up. Allow it to clear all the damage that has accumulated. That's what fasting does. And you can talk about different ways of fasting. It's different for men, it's different for women, it's different depending on what phase of life or what goal you have. But fasting in principle is the act of turning off hunger to allow the body to clean. And we just passed Easter, right? We passed Lent, the Jewish holidays, the Muslim holidays, the Christian holidays. Isn't it interesting that they all have an element of fasting? Isn't that really, do you think thousands of years ago, they actually said, maybe it's a good idea to fast, to turn off hunger. And isn't it interesting that a lot of this happens in spring, in the time of renewal, in the time of cleaning, in the time of rebirth? It all makes sense. So just a little religious history. But to your question about GLP-1s, so GLP-1 agonists are a class of medication that were traditionally used for the treatment of diabetes, but are now used for obesity and weight loss, and are now even used for more diseases. Because what they're finding is that if you treat the root cause of high blood sugar or obesity, essentially what you're treating is inflammation. You're treating a dangerous metabolic inflammation. And if you treat that inflammation at its core, maybe your migraines will disappear. Maybe your polycystic ovarian syndrome will disappear. Maybe you'll have an easier time getting pregnant. So inflammation and metabolic disease is at its core of every disease. And that's what they're finding with GLP-1 agonists. So yes, GLP-1 agonists, because they turn off a signal for hunger, yes, people do lose weight. Yes, predominantly they lose visceral fat. Visceral fat is the fat that covers your gut, that covers your liver, that covers your heart. You don't want to walk around with 2 kilos of fat around your heart. But that's what visceral fat is. And I can't see it. It's not here. It's inside. I can measure it through a body composition test, but I can't see it. But can you imagine knowing that you had 2 kilos of fat around your heart? Who would want that? That will have tremendous effects. So a lot of people take GLP-1 agonists. But what we also see, and I've seen this in quite a few clients, is that because the nature of the medicine turns off hunger, a lot of people, of course, they don't feel hungry. And they predominantly don't feel hungry with certain foods that are good for them. So they predominantly don't feel the desire to eat protein and to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. They might just go for something that's a bit easy to digest. And then what happens is they actually enter a state of malnourishment. And what we see on the body composition is that their muscle mass also goes down. What we also see is that the collagen starts to decrease. So a lot of people who take GLP-1 agonists, they might, in the US, they call it Ozempic face, because they say like you've actually changed the structure of the face because you've lost so much collagen and fat that it looks skeletal, it looks sunken. And I just had a client who actually on his labs, he had oxidative stress. He had cellular damage from Ozempic because he was in such a malnourished state, his mitochondria were not working well. So I think this is an area of great interest. I think it's indicated for many people, but I caution it for people that are in this gray zone. Because if you're in this gray zone where you don't have inflammatory disease, you are not markedly overweight, you're just using it to maybe put yourself a little bit over the edge with your weight, I ask you to use it with caution with your doctor and to be mindful of these other side effects.
But is the influence of it similar to just a purposeful fasting that we would do without these type of peptides? Or I'm really curious of the impact on the gut health specifically for this.
Well, yeah, because if you don't eat these certain foods, you will.
Simple as we're basically in the fasting process, and then that has its own consequences because it's taken off too far. Or is there something else in addition?
It's more.
Doesn't it even actually begin in the?
It begins in the receptors. Yeah.
Could be in the gut as well, but it's switching off.
Yeah. So it's more because it has an effect on your blood sugar regulation, but it also turns off hunger. Fasting is more. Fasting, because of the act of fasting, you're regulating your blood sugar because you're not consuming food, so your pancreas doesn't send out insulin, so your blood sugar is stable. But beyond that, you're not changing your gut microbiome in a dramatic way. You're changing more the cellular waste. What I thought was interesting with the clients that I saw was that many of them had cellular damage because they were taking a GLP-1 for too long or in the incorrect dose. So again, it's something that you have to really be in proper consultation with your doctor because it's more than just weight. It has tremendous metabolic effects. It has effects on collagen, it has effects on muscle, it has effects on cysts, it has effects on the pancreas. So there's other things that you have to be aware of. Any other questions?
because I also wanted to ask about fasting. And just, do you have experience with very long fasting? Because I was listening to podcasts and doctors on topic, and they really say that for gut health to have to be 72 hours of fasting, which I don't even know how I would ever be able to do it or why. So I'm just curious a little bit about this. Like, you mentioned, okay, we're going to clean it, and that for me makes sense. But what about these really long fasts? Do you think this is beneficial or not?
So like fasting, meaning no food for 72 hours, this is a very intense cleansing. It's not done in every center. It's done in certain centers. There's actually quite a few that do it in Asia, more than even Europe and the US. It is a dramatic reset. I don't think it is necessarily needed to do it in that dramatic way. And the reason is because you can have amazing benefits with something called a fasting mimicking diet, which is a more sustainable way to fast than just not eating for 72 hours. The reason they say 72 hours is because after 72 hours of fasting in any way, your body goes into ketosis and you start to feel the metabolic shift. Ketosis means that you're not burning sugar and you're not burning muscle for energy. You start to burn fat. So when you eat, predominantly because it's easy to digest sugar to make ATP, that's the easy way to do it. But then you don't burn fat. Fat is a bit more time intensive and expensive. So when you go through ketosis, and ketosis is this extreme limitation, then the body says, I'm really not getting any sugar, so I need to reach into my fat stores, and they start to use fat for energy. And that process of using fat for energy also gives you other benefits. It gives you a mental clarity that a lot of people love. They actually say, I love feeling like this. But you don't need to do an intense 72-hour no food fast to get the benefits. You could on a day-to-day level, you could say, I fast for 12 hours. And that is a fast. It's a valid fast. And I will also say that men tend to do better with extreme fasting than women. So I think if you put a husband and a wife and the husband says, oh man, I went 72 hours without food and I feel great, it is more likely the woman will say, I'm struggling with this. And the reason is because of the hormonal fluctuations, because an extreme fast, the woman's hormones perceive it as an extreme stress. And so they actually don't like that. They actually say, wait, I'm like stressed. I'm malnourished. It's like I'm in danger. So I'm actually not going to lose weight. I actually have to conserve my weight because it's as if I'm malnourished. That's the key with intense fasting. So you can very easily do a 12-hour fast. You can very easily say once a week. On an extreme level, you might say, I'm going to do an 800-calorie diet fast, or every 3 months, I'm going to do a week of a restricted calorie fasting just to give myself a reset. But I think these 3-day no food fasts, it's a bit much, and I don't think it's necessary. Excellent question.
Because we were speaking about everything pro and
Yes.
post and everything.
Okay, absolutely.
What does it do when we take it? And is there like any research done, or do we know what it does like in the long run, and how, if we have to take in it, how can we build it up again? So it
Excellent question. We didn't talk about that much. So we're going to go back to that principle of that the stomach is like a prison, and the intestines also have to be very sturdy because they're containing all of these toxins and chemicals. So when you take antibiotic, and an antibiotic is a medicine for a bacterial infection, that's the only reason to take it. If you have a grippe, you don't take an antibiotic, right? If your child has a cold, has a virus, for 10 days, they shouldn't take an antibiotic because it's most likely a virus. But if you say, look, no, I have a bacterial infection, so I have to take an antibiotic. You have to. It's normal. But what the antibiotic does is it does play a harsh role with the lining of the gut. So when you take an antibiotic, the lining of the gut will start to open a bit. Just like I was talking about, it becomes a bit leaky. And even though the antibiotic hopefully is for the short term, most of it is short term. If you have like a Lyme disease or a syphilis, it's not, you don't take it for the short term, you take it for a long term. But let's say you took it for 10 days, right? Most people will still feel the effect that the antibiotic had on their gut microbiome, and they will feel like something is a bit off and I don't feel well. But you can rebuild it. So there are certain supplements, there are certain therapies that are really good in rebuilding the gut microbiome after antibiotic use. So one very easy one, just generally speaking, is you take a tablespoon of aloe vera. You take L-glutamine. These tend to rebuild the gut lining. And this is also a reason why, generally speaking, if you take antibiotics, it is a very good idea to also take a probiotic during that and after that, because it's replacing the good bacteria that is lost through the antibacterial. Another thing is that when you take the antibiotic, it kills, it causes an imbalance of the bacteria in the ecosystem. So a lot of people also get a fungal infection after. Have you heard of that? And they might be like, well, where did this come from? I just had a bacterial infection and now I have a fungal infection. But it makes sense because if you have that imbalance, you don't have enough good bacteria. And then let's say you had some yeast down here and it goes up here because the lining has been disturbed, then you'll have a yeast infection. And then you have to treat that as well. So this is why it's always a very good idea to, if you're taking an antibiotic, to also increase your probiotic foods like we talked about and take a probiotic and think about other ways to heal the gut lining. But I will just add on to that excellent question because a lot of people ask, what about acid blockers, pantoprazole, omeprazole? And you say like, well, some people have problems because they feel the acid here and they feel the acid here. So then they take a medicine that blocks acid, right? And they say like, my doctor gave me this, right? It's meant to block acid because I feel acid. But remember what I said, the stomach needs acid. It needs acid to do the work that it does. The problem when people feel the acid here or here is because of that leakiness. It's because of that disturbance. It's not because of the acid itself. And the stomach actually needs acid to do its work. If you don't have enough acid, it cannot digest. And over the long period, what I really hate about these medicines is that many people just stay on them forever. Like they're given omeprazole maybe when they're 30 years old and they never stop. They just take it. And this also has repercussions, not just on your gut, but on your bone health, on your cognitive health. So I want you to, whenever you have to take a medicine, and there are times that you absolutely have to, I just want you to always be mindful of it, to always go back to your doctor and say, when does it stop? Because the doctor is not going to actually, he might not see you, right? He might not see you after that medicine, after that period of 2 weeks or a month. So always think there should be a time period of off, and there should be a time period for repair.
I want to ask one last question and quickly. In our menstrual cycles, right before, I have a feeling that even if we do everything
right,
exactly, your body kind of just goes crazy.
Yep.
Like your skin goes crazy, your cravings, you're not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something internal, or is that something that we're external to cause it?
That's a great question, and that could be its own lecture, but I will answer it like this. Generally speaking, if you have mild changes in energy, mild changes in sleep, mild pain, this is normal. But if you're someone who says like, look, my mood is crazy, I'm going to kill someone, or I have zero energy, I actually have to call out of work, and I have significant pain, and the only way to manage pain is either I call out of work or I'm constantly taking medicine. This is not typical for menstrual cycle. This suggests hormonal imbalance, predominantly estrogen dominance. So it is coming from this cycle that there's too much estrogen relative to progesterone.
But is that because normally the fix they give you is more progesterone? Does that?
No,
the other?
that doesn't fix it. That's a great question. So that's the nuance of it. People always say, like, if you're talking about too much estrogen, then just increase the progesterone. But it's not that the progesterone is low. It's this balance. It's that the estrogen is too high compared to the progesterone. The main inflammatory hormone is estrogen. It's not the progesterone. The progesterone being low, it has other side effects. So people, like, especially if you're going through menopause, you do feel the effects of a low progesterone. So people feel not so calm. They might feel a bit more irritable. They might not sleep well because progesterone is the hormone of calm. It's the nervous system hormone. You also feel it in your period because the first part of the period is the rise of estrogen, and then the second part of the period is the rise of progesterone. So you do feel it. And the role of the progesterone is to prepare the uterus for pregnancy, right? That's the whole point. But the main inflammation comes from the estrogen being way too high. It's not like the progesterone is here, but we want to get it here. It's more that this is just too high. And we don't see that pattern also with testosterone. There are also, you can have low testosterone, you can have high testosterone, and each of them have different problems by themselves. But the act of testosterone imbalance is not as significant as estrogen dominance. But people who take testosterone, sometimes what happens is it converts to estrogen. And then they feel it. So men take testosterone for different reasons. And then they say, like, wait a second, I might have boobs, or I might feel like I have gained weight here, or my voice has changed a bit. And this is the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. So these things with the hormones, they're so nuanced, and they're really a mirror into what's going on. And it has to be really precise. It cannot be like, if anyone is measuring their thyroid hormone or takes thyroid medicine, you know there's a difference between 2 and 2.5 and 3. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. The same with the female hormones, the same with testosterone.
So it goes back to a healthy diet.
It will help the root cause.
But I think, just to mention, because this was excellent, I think that we also have to talk about stress management and nervous system regulation, because what I see that the root cause starts there, and then it affects the gut, and then like this cascade goes on. But a lot of women who come to me, they do everything right. They have their supplement protocol and eat healthy and the fibers, and they feel shitty. But like, if you're constantly on high alert, the body cannot do the work. And then you get kind of all the symptoms. So what is your approach for?
No, I completely agree. And that's why it's that principle. If you're under attack, if you're under threat, if you're not safe, nothing will work. Your digestion I completely agree with you. Digestion will not work. Reproduction will not work. Sleep will not work. And this is what I always try to tell my patients, is that stress is a toxin. It is a toxin as much as alcohol and cigarette smoke is. We don't think of it like that. We almost think of it like stress is just there, and some people handle it better and some people don't handle it better, but you'll never get rid of it, so why should I try? And this can be a whole different lecture, Tanya and Dina, but the resilience of the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve, this is not about, what I always try to teach my patients is that it's not about removing stress. If, God forbid, you lost your job or your health suffered or something bad happened, I would be foolish to say, just pretend it didn't happen. Like, this is a serious reason to be stressed, and your body sees that. I'm not like trying to say trick yourself into just being happy when something bad happened. But a whole other lecture could be, how do you train your vagus nerve? How do you train your adaptability to stress? Do you want me to draw it quickly? If I have 2 minutes? Okay. Okay. I think since you raised this excellent question, I think, it's a very important. and it's almost meaningless because you could take 30 supplements and you could do everything right, but if at your core you feel unsafe, your body will say, I am unsafe. So for
one more question, do you think also that this affects leaky gut, like it gets
totally, absolutely. Take the red one. Okay. So because it's on there. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So to talk about the nervous system, and remember that the brain here talks to the brain here through the vagus nerve. So I'm just going to draw that. And please don't judge me on my art. I'm not an artist. I can teach, but I'm not a good artist. So here's the gut, right? This is the brain. And this is that's not a good drawing, but I'll try. This is the gut, and this is the vagus nerve. And physiologically, medically, the vagus nerve is really important because if I draw it like this, it's literally a highway. It's a connecting highway between the brain up here and the brain in the gut. But it plays two different roles. The vagus nerve goes to the heart. It is the pacemaker of the heart. What does that mean? It means it tells the heart to slow down. Makes sense, right? Because I said if you're under attack, it beats faster because it has to. You have to run and you have to attack. But when you're calm, your heart doesn't beat fast, right? So that's the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the brake of the heart. And then the vagus nerve goes through the diaphragm, meaning that it allows us to breathe deeply, right? And then it goes into the gut. And how does it work? The vagus nerve health, the health of our response to stress, can be measured. Does anyone know how? It's something we use on our heart rate variability. Has anyone heard of that? Can anyone? Yep. Okay. What is heart rate variability besides a number on a Whoop or a Garmin? What does it mean?
Is it the break between the heartbeats?
Very close. Very close. Heart rate variability is that with every breath you take, your heartbeat changes. And you might think, logically, well, I don't want my heartbeat to change that much. Like, shouldn't it be 60, 62, 59, pretty stable? Why should it go high and low and high and low? Isn't that unhealthy? It's actually the opposite. Heart rate variability, Herzfrequenzvariabilität, by definition means the more variable it is, the more up and down it is, the healthier it is. And why? It has to do with this. Because again, if you breathe from here, if you are not using your vagus nerve to lift your diaphragm, you are not going to change your heartbeat that much, right? Because you're breathing very shallow, very ineffective. But if you breathe from here, you lift the diaphragm, your heartbeat gets changed dramatically because the vagus nerve is working. So the heartbeat will say, oh, I just went from 50 and then I went to 90 and then I went to 60 and I'm really going up and down and up and down. And you don't feel that. It's not something you're conscious of. But you can measure it. And how do you measure? And this goes back to your excellent point. Your excellent point, and this is where, like, when I talk to my patients and they say, I measure my heart rate variability, it's a number. I always try to teach them to look at it in a different way. The number is kind of meaningless because your number is different from my number. And it doesn't really matter what my number is. It matters how you're doing, meaning you might not have the highest number, right? You might be at a 20. It's not the highest number. But if somehow you raised your number from 20 to 40, you've made a huge improvement in your health. So who cares what my number is? I could be at a 60, and that's my baseline. But if I suddenly drop to 40, I don't feel good, right? So my 60 to 40 is not good for me, but your 20 to 40 is really good for you. And what matters is how you train the dimensions of heart rate variability. So heart rate it's not good. And I really need to draw this part. This is like the one part I need to draw. Here we go. Okay. So heart rate, F, and D. Circle. Okay. Heart rate variability on a device is measured on a number, but when you formally test it, it's made of 3 dimensions. Only one dimension is the heart rate. Only one. So meaning that if I exercise a lot, I'm a marathon runner, my heart rate is going to be low. My heart rate is going to be 40. So it means like on this dimension, I'm really, really good because my athleticism and my training has lowered my heart rate. But there's 2 other dimensions. And these are, to your point, I think even more important. They're called flexibility and dynamics. And what does that mean? It's not easy to describe, so I always use a story. I always use a story that, who has children here? I know you have children. You were pregnant when I saw you. Okay, so your baby, he can't run yet, but when he runs, let's say you're going to Paracelsus and then on Belleriva Strasse, he runs into the street. Will you be calm? No. You were calm driving because you know the way to Paracelsus and you know your routine and you know what you're going to do. But the minute that your child runs into the street, you are not calm. You are under threat. You are in the worst stressful period of your life and you have to act. Otherwise, you will run him over. So what is flexibility and dynamic? Flexibility is your nervous system's seeing that something has changed, seeing that we have gone from a state of calm and safety to a dangerous situation. And flexibility is also the opposite. It's we have gone from a stressful situation to a happy situation. And that makes sense in life because, like I said, we don't live in a dream world where just everything is perfect and there's no external stress. Life and health is about when you are predominantly calm, predominantly safe, but when there is a stress or a burden or an accident or a very intense period in your life, you have to respond. And you have to respond in a safe way. That's flexibility. So then what do? You're a good driver. And you saw that your child is in the street, and now what do? You pull the brake. You hit the brake. Dynamic is the brake. It is the brake of your nervous system. It is how fast you have responded. So flexibility is the sight, and dynamic is the response. It's the action. And people who have a resilient nervous system are people who have a low heart rate, who have a high flexibility, and a high dynamic response. And to put it in a way that we understand, I always think no matter how athletic you are, we can all learn a bit from elite athletes. We can all learn a bit from the Olympics. Because think about it. What do they do all their life, every single day? For 99% of their life, they train, they eat well, they sleep, they do periods of recovery. They do everything to put their body in the best optimal state and to recover from a period of high training. But they're not in danger, right? They're not competing yet. They're just training. They're trying to get better. But they're doing it with a purpose. They're doing it so that when it's the Olympics and it's the most stress and the most pressure that they ever have, and they're not relaxed, they can use their flexibility and their dynamic to change their reaction of stress from one of danger, of insecurity, of threat, to excitement, to opportunity, to being ready. And then they perform. And you know when they perform well. And so they train so that their body and their mind is in a state of preparation and readiness and safety. And then when the threat or the stress is there, they perform, they rise. That's what an ideal nervous system is. It's this ability to be most of the time safe, calm, ready, prepared, and balanced. But when you have to act, when you lose your job, sickness comes, something bad happens, you have the tools ready to react and then to recover without doing long-term damage. And I hope that when we talk about nervous system health, the response to stress, that's the key message. I've had so many clients that they say, like, I'm a CEO, so I travel all the time. I have 16,000 employees. I have stress. I'm not sitting on a beach with nothing going on. I have active reasons to be stressed. But if they have a healthy parasympathetic nervous system, we don't measure that stress because they don't perceive their life to be under attack. They perceive their life to be one of readiness and preparation and opportunity and recovery. And conversely, since I talked about religion a little bit before, the people that I've seen who have the best heart rate variability out of almost all of my clients, it was the religious people. So it was the Muslims who prayed 5 times a day. It was the more religious Jewish or Catholics. And if you think about it, it makes sense because when you are a very devout religious person, no matter what goes on in your world, you're consciously taking time out of your day to be present, to express gratitude, to be at peace, to remind yourself that no matter what's going on out here, I am safe. This is active parasympathetic training and it is measured. And it's really amazing to me when I see like a woman who's 80 years old and in every other way, she's not healthy. She doesn't exercise. She doesn't eat well. She doesn't take any vitamins. She doesn't really not healthy. But you measure these 3 things. And I say, what do you do? And she says, I live in gratitude. I live in safety. I live in presence. I have faith that things are okay. And I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. And also to think of yourself as a resilient person, as a person that when stress comes, it will not overwhelm you. It will not destroy you. You actually can meet that challenge. You can think of it not as an attack, but as a release. I'm releasing my energy. I'm releasing my power, and then I recover from it. And I think that's what health is. Health is not living on a beach with no external burden. Health is we prepare, we are in balance, we're at peace, and when the challenge comes, we rise, and then the challenge leaves, and we recover, and we have the tools to do so. So I'm really glad you asked that question.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that was a lot. And I just want to, can I just say something before you? Okay, because I know what you're going to say. So I just want to thank my wonderful hosts and friends for giving me the opportunity to do this for the second time. And where I work, we work a lot with red light and we work a lot with mindfulness. So I'm just so proud of these ladies for bringing this to the community, for making it a community, for making it an essential part of your daily rhythm and not something that we do once in a while, but saying like, this is something I'm going to do for myself. And these 22 minutes or 11 minutes is something that, again, it's working this. It's clearing our mitochondria, it's helping our collagen, it's reducing inflammation. But more than all of these medical benefits, Tanya and Dina have created a community for men and women to learn about how to be healthy and at peace. And I'm so, so grateful that they're here, that they've opened this establishment. And I think all of us are. And I just want to tell you that I trained in the US at Harvard. I moved to Switzerland 6 years ago. I started working at a place called the Shirin Group in Vierwaldstättersee, where I learned these principles of preventative medicine, epigenetic health, and a more holistic and complete view of how to be a healthy person. And then I opened up my own business where I do health advisory. So I actually instruct my patients on these principles and I give them protocols on how to achieve their goals with these basics. And I've given you all my brochure. You have a discount card as well. So because you are here, kindly taking your time to be here, if you use that discount, if you email me and use that discount code for my consultation, you'll receive a discount. And I would love to invite you for a complimentary consultation if you're interested to learn more about what I do. And I'm just so grateful to my hosts.
We are so grateful that you were here. Thank you so
Thank
much
you, Han.
for sharing
Thank
your
you.
brilliant mind with us.